Hello, we are here with Professor Juan Santillán in order to make an interview with him about teaching grammar. So let's make him some questions. So let's go with the first question, which is, teacher, well, approximately what percentage of class time do you spend on teaching grammar activities?
Well, I would say about 30 to 40%, and it also depends on the level I'm teaching. If I'm teaching younger kids, I'm going to spend like 10% of the time doing that. If I'm teaching higher advanced students, I'm going to spend more time teaching grammar, so all other needs.
Okay, teacher, the second question. Approximately what percentage of the textbook you use is specifically devoted grammar activities?
Well, once again, it all depends on the level I'm teaching. Out here at university level, if you teach a grammar class, nearly, let's say, 70% of the textbook will be devoted to that. But if you teach that in high school, I'll say around 40 to 50%, and depending on the level as well. If you teach it to kids, I think grammar activities will be devoted to nearly 10 to 20% or more than that.
Okay, teacher, the next question is how important do you think grammar teaching is in TEFL program?
Well, once again, it all depends on the purpose you're learning English. If you're learning English just to communicate, well, grammar knowledge won't be that big of a requirement, right, in equal environments. But again, the level is important. You can teach a class without even teaching grammar if you're teaching to first grade, seventh grade, well, fourth grade students. But if you're teaching English to high school students, especially in high school where the English program is important, let's say Catalinas or whatever, teaching grammar, it's important. I would say I would spend, I don't know, probably 40% of my class teaching grammar, depending on how hard the structure is. So I would say probably it's important for them to teach grammar. But it all depends on the level. It all depends on the purposes you're learning.
Here. Next, when you have a conversation in English with people who are not just students, how important is it to you to use correct grammar structure?
Okay, so I'm having a conversation with someone who's not my student. Well, it is important, but not that big of a deal. I mean, I think you can see grammar in the same way you can see pronunciation when you use it for communicative purposes. As long as it's not an obstacle, as long as it's not a hindrance for you to understand what the other person is saying, I don't think that's a big of a problem. Okay, but if I hear someone who uses grammar correctly, obviously I'm glad, and my immediate idea is, okay, he or she has spent a lot of time learning the language.
Okay, next question. What do you think when you hear a foreigner speak Spanish using grammatically correct structures?
Well, first of all, I'm very impressed because Spanish is a very hard language to learn. Then my idea is he or she has spent a lot of time learning the language, maybe because living in a foreign place, whatever, where Spanish is spoken.
Next question is what do you think when you hear a foreigner speak Spanish using grammatically correct structure?
The same idea. Well, I won't laugh or anything because we all make mistakes, but that will give you an idea of how long, how important, because learning Spanish is been for that person, right? He makes a lot of mistakes, probably it's not important, he's new at it, right? But as I told you, as long as it's not an obstacle, I don't think that matters in a communicative environment. It all depends on the purpose that you're learning English.
What is the best way for teaching grammar for you?
I believe that the best way to do that is in an inductive way. Inductive way, you depart from your examples and then you build up the rule. As opposite to what has been done up until here recently, when you come to the class and say, okay, today we're gonna learn about the simple present. Okay, and you give the structure, after the structure, you give the rules, after the rules, you give the example. One of the best way to do that, a better way to do that is doing it inductively. Okay, you go from the examples to the rule. Okay, and actually in a recent conference there was an idea of it saying that you should mix both inductive and deductive way of reasoning. You should depart from example, let your students figure out a rule and then reinforce the rule and actually correct the rule when they're move again to another example.
How can the teacher present the structure to make it more memorable for the student?
You should present the structure based on a situation. You cannot present the structure, the grammatical structure, departing from grammar. Okay? You cannot do that. For example, if you're gonna teach the simple past, you create a situation. You need to create a situation. That's extremely important. You said, today I'm gonna tell you about my activity, what I did last weekend. And now I want you to tell me what you did last weekend. And you depart from a situation. And how memorable that teaching is going to be for the students is, it will depend on the degree to which they identify with the situation. If you start teaching them about ancient literature, to teach about the simple past, they're not going to be interested, right? But if you start with events that they like, recent events that they like, they're going to be interested, and it's going to be memorable for them.
Well, finally, teacher has the last question. Have you developed a useful procedure of your own to present structures which you would want to share with your learners?
Well, I haven't done that for my own, but I have found out that teaching grammar is important. Okay? There are some tendencies, there are some ways that tell you you don't have to teach grammar at all. But I believe that you have to teach grammar. Personally, I believe in the presentation practice production stage, which is something you're going to learn. Okay? You start with a warm-up, you present or create a situation in which you use the structure. You use the structure in the situation, then based on what you have been talking or discussing, or you can even be part from a reading or a listening program, you build a structure chart. And by structure chart, I don't mean a formula. You use different colors, you use different ways for highlighting the structure. So a student, without being taught grammar, they already see something. You give 3 examples in which you don't use the S form of a verb with the third person, but then you give 3 other examples in which you use pronouns like he, she, it, or names like Mary, Jacob, or Daniel, and then you highlight the S form, they will realize that. Once you have moved from that presentation, if you need, you should give some additional explanation, grammar explanation, if needed. Then you move to practice. There are 2 ways of practicing structure. Practicing structure, you can practice it mechanically or meaningfully. I would advise that you do both. A mechanical practice, such as filling the blanks or just complete the sentence or whatever, in which students, they don't have much of an option as to what to write. Then you have to move to a meaningful practice activity, where you practice the structure, doing something that the students can relate to. You ask them, what did you do last week? What do you think about this or about that? So their scope of options is bigger. And finally, you move towards a communicative activity, in which, as you know, you have to have 3 characteristics, right? You have to have an information gap, you have to have options, and you have to get feedback, right? And then, if you have time, you close that out. The communicative activity is called as a production. If you have time, you can connect that with different skills, right? You can begin your presentation with a listening activity or a reading activity, then move to writing, and leave speaking for the production part. But it's all up to what the teacher needs in specific classes. But I don't think there's a formula that will give you success.
Thank you very much, teacher.
Yeah, man. So we back in the club.